This is Histories and Mysteries. I'm Ashley.
And I'm not Jessica. I'm Rochelle.
Jessica is not with us today. She actually had to work a 12-hour shift. So our condolences go out to her.
Jeez. Yeah, no, thank you.
Yeah, that sounds awful. But so we are recording without our famous Jessica, but she will be back for next week. And on this week's episode, I am covering the famous Watcher, which I'm sure if you know anything about true crime or spookiness, you've heard of the Watcher. But they just, let me get into it. And Rochelle's doing ghost stories.
Yeah, kind of a continuation of last week. I went and I found a lot of like true life people's experiences. And some of them are real spooky. So
this is going to be a really creepy episode. So buckle up. But the Watcher, they released the full letters. So I have them to read. I can't remember. I think they only released them a couple years ago because the family was keeping it very close because the police told them not to show anybody. So, I mean, we've gotten like excerpts from it, but it's a full one. So I'm excited.
I'm excited about this one too.
Yeah.
I got my sandwich from Tim Hortons.
I got my water
ready.
I got it blurred still. I had a meeting and my cat and my dog were like laying around in the background. So I blurred my background.
I love videos of like pandemic like reporters and stuff whose like broadcasts get interrupted by their pets.
Yes. I love the famous one where the guy is broadcasting and his kid runs into the room and then his wife like frantically runs in and yanks the kid back.
Funny.
That's a good one. All right. So I got my information from New York Post, Washington Post, All That's Interesting, which Jessica would be really excited about, medium.com, and then a super great, super detailed article from thecut.com. So they had a lot of detail because they actually interviewed Derek and Maria throughout this whole process. So if you haven't heard of the Watcher, it is probably one of the creepiest stories. And I'm going to ruin it right now. It's never been solved. So, it is terrifying, and just what they went through is such a nightmare, especially like from the financial aspect of it too. And then how they were perceived in their neighborhood is awful. But anyway, we'll get into it. So Maria and Derek Broaddus were from Westfield, New Jersey, which is a fairly small town. A lot of citizens compared it to like Mayberry from Andy Griffith's show, the Andy Griffith Show. That tiny little idyllic town that has like 2 police officers and that's it. And they're like everybody's best friend. And in fact, this neighborhood was listed as one of the top 30 safest communities in America in 2014. It's also a super wealthy area. The median household income being $159,000. So that's the median. Okay. So
what?
Yeah. And the house the Broadduses picked was not cheap. If you want to look it up, anybody, it is 657 Boulevard Drive, Westfield, New Jersey. And if you look at the Redfin one, that's the only one where I found pictures of the inside. And there's only one picture of the inside, but it is gorgeous. The outside of the house looks like a cute little quaint.
Kind of reminds me of that Amityville horror house with the like barn shape.
Yeah. Yep. It's an interesting shape, but it's just like a cute little quaint neighborhood. But if you see the inside, you're like, oh, that's an expensive house because they bought it for $1.3 million. So super expensive. It's 6 bedrooms, 4 baths, 3,869 square feet. The Broadduses were ecstatic. This was their dream home. Derek had worked his way up in the company from like a lower level all the way to senior vice president in a Manhattan insurance company. So he was loaded, but he didn't, he worked hard for it. I think they said that like the first house that they bought was like $330,000, and then they bought a $700,000 home, and then they bought this $1.3 million home. So they like worked their way up, which kind of comes back to bite them in the butt later according to the neighbors. But anyway, so they closed on their dream house in June of 2014 and planned to move in after they did some renovations. They had 3 kids, and so they were going to obviously have enough rooms. There's 6 rooms. So there was enough of them, but they just wanted to do some like cosmetic renovations, a couple things here and there. They had some contractors and some builders coming in and out, but nothing crazy. And then one evening in June, Derek was in the home painting and he decided to check the mail. In his mail was a white envelope, and written on the front in thick handwriting were the words, "The new owner." So it was addressed to the new owner. And this is what it said. "Dearest new neighbor at 657 Boulevard, allow me to welcome you to the neighborhood." So far, so good. I'd be like, oh, what a nice letter. "How did you end up here? Did 657 Boulevard call you with its force within? 657 Boulevard has been the subject of my family for decades now, and as it approaches its 110th birthday, I have been put in charge of watching and waiting for its second coming. My grandfather watched the house in the 1920s, and my father watched the house in the 1960s. It is now my time. Do you know the history of the house? Do you know what lies within the walls of 657 Boulevard? Why are you here? I will find out. I see that you have already flooded 657 Boulevard with contractors so that you can destroy the house as it was supposed to be. Tisk, tisk, tisk. Bad move. You don't want to make 657 Boulevard unhappy. You have children. I have seen them. So far, I think there are 3 that I have counted. Are there more on the way? Do you need to fill the house with the young blood I requested? Better for me. Was your old house too small for the growing family? Or was it greed to bring me your children? Once I know their names, I will call to them and draw them to me. Who am I? There are hundreds and hundreds of cars that drive by 657 Boulevard each day. Maybe, am I in one? Look at all the windows you can see from 657 Boulevard. Maybe I am in one. Look out any of the many windows in 657 Boulevard at all the people who stroll by each day. Maybe I am one. Welcome, my friends, welcome. Let the party begin. The Watcher. So obviously Derek was freaked the fuck out. He called the police and let them know what was going on. And an officer came out and read the letter and said, quote, "What the fuck is this?" And then he asked Derek if he had any enemies, a pretty common question. He also recommended that Derek move a piece of construction equipment from the front porch to the back in case the Watcher tried to toss it through a window and break in. And that was about it for now. I mean, they didn't really have anything to go on other than that. So Derek decided to email the previous owners to see if they knew anything about it. And the previous owners said that they did receive a letter from the Watcher right before they moved, but that they had lived there for 23 years. And that was the only letter they ever received. She did admit it was odd and had a similar watching for generations tone, but nothing crazy. She had grown children. It wasn't like threatening to her children or anything. So they just kind of thought nothing of the letter and threw it away and moved out. But they did go with Maria to the police station the next day to follow up about the letter Derek got. And the detective told them not to tell anyone about the letters, not even the neighbors, because at this point they were all suspects. The whole situation obviously put the Broadduses on high alert. Derek canceled a work trip so that he and his wife and kids weren't alone in the house. They hadn't moved there yet, but just like going back and forth with their renovations and stuff. They would get nervous if their kids went out of sight while playing outside, and they became suspicious of every neighbor they had. One time, Derek was showing off to some of the neighbors some of the renovations they did, and one lady commented that it would be nice to have some young blood in the neighborhood. And Derek went on high alert. Everyone to him at this point was an enemy. But like, whoever says young blood, stop it. It's gross. It's weird. Stop. I hate it. It's like young blood. Yeah. Just say kids. Like 2 weeks after they received the first letter, Maria stopped by the house to check out some paint samples and check the mail while there. When she opened the mailbox, her heart sank. There was another letter. She immediately called the police. This time, the letter in the letter, the watcher used the Broaddus's name. They spelled it wrong, but it started by saying Mr. and Mrs. Broaddus, and then started talking about how much the watcher had learned about them in the past 2 weeks. The watcher talks about the kids and listed them by name in birth order and their nicknames. So whoever this watcher was, they were watching and listening to the family. And this letter said, the workers have been busy and I have been watching you unfold carfuls of your personal belongings. The dumpster is a nice touch. Have they found what is in the walls yet? In time they will. I am pleased to know your names now, Derek and Maria, and the names of the young blood you have brought to me. You certainly say their names often. And then he lists their names. I saw one of them on the easel with the easel on the porch. Is she the artist in the family? 657 Boulevard is anxious for you to move in. It has been years and years since the young blood ruled the hallways of this house. Have you found all of the secrets it holds yet? Will the young blood play in the basement, or are they too afraid to go down there alone? I would be very afraid if I were them. It is far from the rest of the home. If you were upstairs, you would never hear them scream. Will they sleep in the attic, or will you all sleep on the second floor? Who has the bedrooms facing the street? I'll know as soon as you move in. It will help me to know who is in which bedroom. Then I can plan better. All of the windows and doors in 657 Boulevard allow me to watch you and track you as you move through the house. Who am I? I am the watcher and have been in control of 657 Boulevard for the better part of 2 decades now. The Woods family turned it over to you. It was their time to move on and kindly sold it when I asked them to. I pass by many times a day. 657 Boulevard is my job, my life, my obsession. And now you are too, Broaddus family. Welcome to the product of your greed. Greed is what brought the past 3 families to 657 Boulevard, and now it has brought you to me. Have a happy moving day. You know I will be watching. The Watcher. Ugh, it's terrifying. The family was obviously terrified and decided to hold off on moving in until they could figure out who were sending the letters. Because of this delay, the watcher did send another letter saying, where have you gone to? 657 Boulevard is missing you. So who could this psycho be? Well, apparently this area, as we spoke about before, is really well-to-do. And Boulevard was like the street to live on. Putting offers on houses there was competitive. People would be outbid by $300,000 sometimes. And not only was the Broaddus' house on the street, it was the house. It was built in 1905 and was the grandest house there. So they thought, well, maybe someone was pissed who was outbid. But there was only 2 other interested buyers. One dropped out after getting some bad medical news, and one found a different house. And the letters made it sound like it was someone who was in the neighborhood, or at least around enough to hear all the details that were in these letters. And they did have one clue. The letters had all been processed in Kearney, which was the distribution center in northern New Jersey. So they know it was local. Also, the first letter had been postmarked before the sale was public and one day after the contractors had showed up. The previous owners had never put up a for sale sign. And at that point, the renovations were mostly interior. And even other neighbors said that they didn't notice anything going on in the house. So the watcher must have had information that most people did not. They did have an easel on the porch, but you could only see it from behind the house or from next door because there were bushes that blocked its view from the street. And this easel thing becomes really important because the watcher did mention it in the letters. And there's only these certain areas that you can see it. So either the watcher was like on their porch, like walked up to the house on the porch and saw it, or is in one of these areas. One neighbor did describe to Derek the people who lived between them. So like Derek's neighbor, they were the Langfords. There was Peggy Langford, who was in her 90s, and then several of her children who were in their 60s, all living there. One of her younger kids, Michael, was described as a kind of Boo Radley character. and the family had been living there since the 60s. So Derek thought this had to be the watcher. They were located in a position where they could see the easel to know the house had been sold or being renovated. They were close enough to hear conversations, and they had been in the house since the 60s, which, if you remember, when the watcher said his dad started watching the house. Richard Langford, the dad, had died 12 years earlier, and the new watcher said he had been watching the house for, quote, the better part of 2 decades. So all of the timelines fit. Derek immediately told Detective Lugo, and he said that the family was already on their radar. Right after the first letter had been sent, police brought Michael in for questioning. Michael was one of the kids, the 60-year-old kids, the kind of weird one. And he said that he had nothing to do with it, but police didn't believe him. Apparently, some of the things Michael said matched the way some of the letters were worded. Lugo's exact quote was, "This isn't CSI Westfield. When the wife is dead, the husband did it." So he basically saying that Michael seemed suspicious, so he probably did it. Unfortunately, though, there wasn't any hard evidence, so they really couldn't do anything. So after the second letter came, Derek said, quote, "This is someone who threatened my kids, and the police are saying probably nothing's going to happen. Probably isn't good enough for me. The person attacked my family, and where I'm from, if you do that, you get your ass beat." I was like, go Derek. The family was terrified, and because the police weren't being super helpful, they decided to do their own investigation. They set up webcams, and Derek would spend nights at the house just crouched in the dark, trying to see if anyone was watching the house. They also hired a private investigator who checked out the neighborhood and ran background checks on the Langfords, but didn't find anything crazy. But after doing some research, they found out that the Langfords were the only family that had been in the neighborhood since the 60s. Derek also knew the former FBI agent that Clarice from Silence of the Lambs was based on. Fun fact. So they reached out to that agent, and they reached out to another agent and to conduct a threat assessment. What they did find was that one agent noticed several clues that pointed to an older writer. The letter also suggested that the writer was an avid reader, and it had a, quote, surprising lack of profanity for the level of anger, which the agent thought meant like a less macho writer, so maybe a little bit more feminine. The agent didn't think the watcher was going to act on the threats, but did note that there were enough typos and errors to imply that they might be erratic. The agent also noted that there was a seething anger towards the wealthy in general. He got that from one example of the letters where it said, "The house is crying from all the pain it's going through. You have changed it and made it so fancy. You are stealing its history. It cries for the past and what used to be in the time when I roamed its halls. The 1960s were a good time for 657 Boulevard when I ran from room to room, imagining the life with the rich occupants there. The house was full of life and young blood. Then I got old, and so did my father, but he kept watching until the day he died. Now I watch and wait for the day when the young bloods will be mine again." So it just seems like he's kind of mad about the renovations, and he or she, the watcher, is kind of mad about the renovations and kind of the money spent on it and stuff like that. The police told the Broadduses to send a letter only to the Langfords saying that they were going to tear down the house and see if they got a reaction, but they didn't. So Detective Lugo brought Michael in for a second interview, but he didn't really get much of anything out of them. And his sister Abby accused the police of harassing her family, which if they didn't do it, they are kind of getting harassed. Yeah. So the Broadduses decided to hire a lawyer who met with the Langford family as well, as their lawyer too. And the Broadduses lawyer showed the Langfords the letters and the photos showing how they had one of the few vantage points to see the easel that is talked about in the letters. Well, the Langfords didn't like being accused, and the meeting grew tense, and the family insisted that Michael was innocent. So it's kind of nothing more they could do. There were a couple of other suspects. The private investigator found that 2 people in the neighborhood were child sex offenders, and the letters seemed to be really focused on the kids. So like maybe the painter of the Broadduses also noticed that the house behind them had 2 lawn chairs very close to their property, the Broadduses property. And he said that one day he saw an older guy sitting in the chair facing the Broadduses house. but there wasn't really any proof other than that. By December of 2014, the police basically said there's nothing else we can do. So the case kind of just went cold. In a last-ditch effort, Derek went to a priest, showed him the letters, and the priest agreed to bless the house, but the letters didn't stop and they were getting worse. Here's the third letter that they received. Where have you gone to? 657 Boulevard is missing you. Are you one of those Hoboken transplants who are ruining Westfield? The house is crying from all the pain it's going through. You have changed it and made it so fancy. You are stealing its history. So this was the kind of excerpt that I read earlier, but so it was talked about his dad watched it till the day, or their dad watched it till the day they died. Now they wait for the young blood will be mine again. And then it finishes off with 657 Boulevard is turning on me. It's coming after me. I don't understand why. What spell did you cast on it? It used to be my friend and now it's my enemy. I am in charge of 657 Boulevard. It is not in charge of me. I will fend off its bad things and wait for it to become good again. It will not punish me. I will rise again. I will be patient and wait for this to pass and for you to bring the young blood back to me. 657 Boulevard needs young blood. It needs you. Come back. Let the young blood play again like I once did. Let the young blood sleep in 657 Boulevard. Stop changing it and let it alone. The Watcher. So the Broadduses obviously did not feel safe and they didn't want to move in, but they had already sold their last house. So they ended up moving in with Maria's parents. But they still had to pay a mortgage on it and they had to do things like, shovel the driveway and mow the lawn. So they had to go over there and do that kind of stuff and then come back. And all of this was obviously affecting Maria and Derek. They were stressed. They were losing money. They were living with her mom. They were scared. And so they started fighting a lot. And Maria went to the doctor and the doctor asked how she was and she burst into tears. So they both decided to go to therapy. So I'm going to stop here actually, and I'll finish this up next week. So next week we will see how they hunt for the Watcher and we will read the fourth and last letter that he sends or he or she sends.
I am putting money on this being a hoax.
You think?
Yeah.
That's one of the big things that the neighborhood said and kind of turned against them, saying it was a hoax.
It's too like the way that the letters are written, the way that they're dressed, it's like sounds too much of like somebody who's doing this like for fun or to get back at somebody, or they're like bored and they want to like spook a new family. I don't know.
So you think it's like someone else doing the hoax? You don't think it's the Broadduses?
I don't know. But I don't think it's like
real
somebody like stalking them.
Yeah. And I'll talk a little bit about that next week because some people did think it was a hoax. I don't think the Broadduses had anything to do with it because they did lose out on quite a bit of money from this. So I don't know what they would have gained from it, but I do get what you're saying about like maybe someone else doing it just to like fuck with people.
Yeah,
people are
I don't
mean.
know.
Yeah. So we'll talk about that a little bit next week.
It was like it could be somebody like who would assume that they would blame it on the Langleys or whatever, like the neighbors.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't think it's that spooky. Like, all right, watch my house. Like,
well, and there are some people that said that when it kind of hits the news, they're like, it's not that bad. I'd live there. Yeah. And they're like, okay, so come live here. Yeah.
Maybe it's not being like, I'm coming for you to find you.
Yeah.
It's like, make the house happy. Okay.
Okay.
I don't know. Maybe I'm being like very disconnected, but like,
yeah, I get you. It would terrify me personally, but I can see where it wouldn't some people.
Yeah. I don't know. It just doesn't seem like that much of a threat.
Yeah.
Because it's like so theatrical in a way.
Yeah, it is very theatrical. Yeah, I definitely agree with that for sure. Okay, let's hear some ghost stories.
All right. So that's just a collection of spooky real life ghost stories from people mostly on Reddit.
Okay.
So number 1. It wasn't a little girl.
Ooh, I already hate it. Anything to do with like little ghost kids, I just little.
I know. Because especially since like usually child ghosts aren't actually just child ghosts.
Ooh, are they usually like demonic energies?
Mm-hmm.
Ugh.
I was camping with my husband and his family at a small remote lake in New Mexico. There were about 10 people in our group and another group of 6 people in the next campsite. It was nighttime. Both groups are doing typical activities, making s'mores, having a few drinks, and telling stories, when we all heard what sounded like a little girl yelling out for help. Neither group had children with them, but we were all positive we were hearing a little girl and decided to search the area we heard the noise from together. There was a field behind our campsites, and we all saw a very tall, pure white figure standing maybe 100 feet away from us in the field, making the noise. We all agreed this thing looked maybe 6 feet tall, skinny, and white as can be. We made our way closer to investigate, but whatever it was that we saw started backing off as we got closer, and it disappeared into the trees. All night we continued to hear a little girl calling for help as we tried to sleep.
Oh,
Slender Man.
I hate that.
Ugh. The next one, The Walking Dead. I'm a psychiatric nurse, and early in my career, I worked at a residential mental health facility. One of our residents was an elective mute, which means that he didn't/wouldn't/couldn't talk, but there was no medical reasons as to why. He had spoken earlier in his life and in fact seemed quite normal back then, with the exception of being close to 7 feet tall.
Holy crap.
He'd been raised in the Deep South and joined the military when he was 19, but one night he vanished. He was declared AWOL, and eventually he was declared missing and dead. 10 years later, a 7-foot tall man walked into a VA hospital emergency room in my part of the Midwest and said to the receptionist, "My name is Marion Duchesne," not the real name. "And I've been dead for 10 years.
Ew.
Those were the last words he ever spoke.
Oh.
He was covered with dust, and he was wearing the same clothes he'd been reported to be wearing the night he vanished. His social security number had not been used, and he had no identification on his person. However, they were able to identify him, I guess, via fingerprints. The family was notified, but they said they had already grieved their lost man, and that whomever he was claiming to be simply could not be him.
Even with DNA evidence? Jeez.
They demanded not to be contacted again.
Ugh.
Marion paced all day, every day, moving his mouth that looked like talking or muttering, but no sound came out. He had an unnerving habit of throwing his head back with his mouth wide open, as if he were laughing heartily, but not even a breath could be heard. If I talked to him, he appeared to listen, periodically throwing his head back in his laughter-mimicking way. Various medications were tried, but they did not affect him either positively or negatively. Occupational therapy did nothing because Marion would just grin, and unless told to stay put, he'd get up and start pacing again. On my last day at the job, the last thing I saw was Marion pacing in the parking lot, throwing his head back to quote unquote laugh.
Oh.
Later, I wondered if all along I'd been dealing with a ghost. All these years later, I still don't know.
The like throwing his head back to laugh with like no noise coming out
Reminds me of did you watch the Joaquin Phoenix Joker movie?
Yes.
Like that like thing he does where
yeah yeah oh, that was terrifying. I loved that movie.
I don't do superhero movies or like anything like that, but like I felt like that could just be a standalone movie.
Yeah, for sure. It was just basically like the spiral into like mental health issue. Like
it didn't have to be connected to Batman.
No, it was so good. I loved watching his like descent into madness.
The unrest stop. I was driving across country with my mom and sister when I was 16, and my sister was 20. It was late, but we were well rested still and alert. We were driving along an interstate and needed gas and a bathroom break, so we stopped at the only rest stop in 200 miles. There was a van full of teenagers on a road trip at the gas station, as well as a small gray car parked at the pump in front of us, with two young men standing still outside it. When we got there, everything felt wrong. We'd been on the road for days and seen many rest stops at night and had never been afraid until then. My mom and sister went inside and I stayed in the car. I heard the teenagers say that they were creeped out and couldn't get the pump to work, and they left in a hurry. I was watching the car in front of us, and the two men had not moved at all, not an inch. They weren't talking, they weren't on their phones. They were just standing there, still as stone. My sister and mom came running back out to the car, and when they got in, the two men slowly turned to look at us while not moving or pivoting the rest of their bodies. And I swear to fucking shit, we all saw the same thing. They had eyes dark as pitch and empty. Truly empty. Not black, not reflecting any light at all, just a void.
Ugh.
We sped out of there and didn't stop until we were in the next city. The worst thing about the entire experience, we couldn't find the place on any map. We knew exactly which spot on the interstate to look, but we couldn't find it on Google Maps or any paper map we had. We even had asked locals about the creepy gas station out on that stretch of road and got only confused looks. We've traveled on that interstate since, and there is no rest stop.
No.
Came for us in the graveyard.
Ugh.
We were driving my friend's really beat up old Subaru through a massive graveyard. We stopped and walked down a hill and came across a little pond. There was someone sitting on a rock on the other side of the pond. The figure was all black and we couldn't make out any features other than the fact that it looked like a man who was wearing some old style top hat. We stupidly waved and shouted, "Hi!"
I would do that too. Hi.
He didn't show any acknowledgement and continued sitting still on the rock. All of a sudden, he jumped to his feet, started running to us on the water.
Oh my
and
God.
Vanished in thin water about halfway on the pond. My friends and I screamed and ran back to the car. The car wouldn't start, and we heard something banging on the back of the car. It wasn't a constant bang, but every few seconds or so we'd hear it. Nobody was outside from what we could see in the dark. Something was making a noise on the car. I opened my phone and I started dialing my mom to come give us a boost, but I had no service. None of us had any cell service.
Oh God.
The next 30 minutes were spent trying to get the car started. No banging was heard afterwards. We felt this heavy pressure around us. Finally, the car started and she hit the pedal to the metal. We sped out of the graveyard so fast. Immediately crossing the gates, all of our phones regained cell service. One thing I know for certain is that someone or something was out there, and it was not an animal or a human.
That gave me chills.
It was good to see an old friend. When I was 37, I went to my high school reunion. I flew into the nearest airport and rented a car. Distance was about 35 miles through a very rural and almost abandoned part of the country. About 3 miles outside of town, I see someone on the side of the road flagging me down. It turned out that it was one of the guys I attended school with, Jim, not his name. Gets in the car and we start talking. I had not seen him in 20 years, but he still looked the same, maybe a little older. We get to town and he asks if I want to come to the VFW and have a drink. He says, "No, just take me home." Jim's parents had lived only a few blocks from my grandmother's house, and I turned in that direction, but he said to take him to the outskirts of town. There was a mobile home park out there, and I figured that's where he lived. When we reached the end of the turnoff, he said, "Just drop me here. It was good to see you again." And he walks off into the night. I go to the VFW, met some of my old classmates. We start to talk. As we were talking about who's coming to the reunion, I mentioned that I just picked up Jim 3 miles east of town and dropped him off. Everyone gets quiet. Even the guy singing karaoke stops and lays down the mic.
Oh no.
My cousin goes white as a new t-shirt. "Barb, Jim died on that curve 8 years ago.
Oh.
Rolled his car. We were at his funeral," I was told. I started to feel really dizzy and I went out to the car to take some deep breaths. There on the seat, the local newspaper printed 8 years previous containing Jim's obituary. I still have the paper.
Oh, I like the title of that. It was good to see an old
Good to see an
friend.
old friend.
Ugh.
Hell hath no fury like a woman's scorn.
Truth.
After we moved into our home, we were told a woman had died there at the hands of her abusive husband.
Oh.
She hated men. My dad would wake up with scratches all over himself. And whenever my brother was mean to my sister or I, he would have scratches on him as well. One day, my brother hurt our sister. He hit her with something. When he woke up later that night, he had a horrible bloody nose.
Oh.
The day we moved out, my brother accidentally broke his twin's arm trying out a wrestling move.
Oh.
He swears that he would have died that night if it wasn't our last in the house. Death came for him.
Oh. I like these titles. They're very good.
I was standing in my parents' room talking to my very sick dad at the time. He was dying of stage 4 esophageal cancer. I got the feeling something was behind me. I looked towards the doorway to the living room. And something about 4'6" and fully black is peeking around the corner with its hands on the door frame. Now get this. I ran towards it.
Why? Why?
And
You're the first one that dies in a horror movie, sir, or ma'am, whoever's writing this.
And it slipped back around the door. When I got outside the doorway, there was nothing. My dad was completely confused, and I stepped back inside the room when I tell him. People who stayed at my house in my dad's final days claimed to have seen it. My mom saw the figure on multiple occasions in multiple places until he passed away. We haven't seen it since.
I wonder if it was like death coming for him.
Grim Reaper.
Yeah, just
Very
like waiting.
Small Grim Reaper.
Yeah, that's true. But baby Grim Reaper comes in different sizes.
A baby.
Baby Grim Reaper.
My mother attracted evil.
Ooh.
After my parents divorced when I was a teenager, I lived with my mother. I experienced lots of paranormal happenings. Several times when I was reading in my bed, the room would start to feel really icy. Next, it would feel as if something/somebody that hated me was staring at me. When I got that feeling, I would leave the room and come back an hour later. Sometimes during the day, I would see a shadow figure sneaking along my bedroom walls. Something in the flat was pretending to be my dog. I went into my room and heard a deep growl from under the bed. My dog wasn't capable of making a noise that deep. It sounded like either a really big dog or a man doing his best dog impersonation. Other times, my dog would whimper and pace in the room next to mine. It wouldn't come when called, as if he was afraid of something in the hallway. When I moved in with my father, the paranormal activity stopped. That reminds me of that story, People Lit Too. Have you heard that? It's like a kind of like a creepypasta, but like before that was a thing.
Okay.
And it's like every night I would go to bed and my dog would like sleep by my bed or whatever. And like the last thing I would do before I go to bed is like reach my hand down and let my dog lick my hand. And then there was one night that like something happened to the dog or whatever, and just like out of habit. Oh no, they reached their hand down, got licked, but then they went to the bathroom to find like their dog dead. And then written in blood on the mirror was like People Lick Too.
That's awful. I hate that. I hate that so much. I hate the dead dog part the worst.
All right. Evicted by a ghost. Shortly after college, I got married. We immediately moved into the basement apartment because that's all that was available within our budget. The place had a poltergeist, and my wife was terrified. Whatever resided there with us made it clear it wanted to live alone. Dishes, glasses, other items would fly off the shelf. My wife was hit several times. There was always an ominous, there was always an ominous.
Yeah, there you go.
Jesus Christ.
I hate it when I trip over words.
There was always an there was always a creepy feeling. Like we were being watched. I don't know why I can't say it like when I read this sentence. There was always an ominous feeling. There we go. Like we were being watched. At night, when we walked through the apartment in the dark, there would be insanely bright flashes of light that would illuminate the entire room. One night, while we were going to bed, as soon as my wife and I walked into the bedroom, we heard a voice from nowhere say, in brackets, my name, move. So I don't know, like Thomas, move.
Excuse me, rude.
My wife looked at me. I looked at her. He looked at me. And I looked at him. I said loudly, you've got it, bud. He moved out 2 days later and stayed with family. The old lady who owned the place died a few months later and the house was torn down. It's still an empty lot to this day, nothing but grass and a tree. I still drive by it every now and then. The demon's room. I worked as a forensic nurse in a hospital lockup unit. We had one older lady who swore she was being haunted and abused by a demon she would call Tiberius.
Oh, that's a
so
fancy
many
name.
crazy things happened while she was on the unit. We go into the room, do normal care, leave, and seconds later she starts screaming bloody murder. We'd run into the room, find her looking like she'd been in a fight with a boxing champ. Bloody lip, black eye, markings all over her body. No one ever saw her doing this stuff to herself. Things would get moved around the room by themselves. At one point, she was in protective restraints because the doctor thought she was hurting herself. There was no way she could have moved or done anything to herself while in these restraints. But new marks would always appear, or her tray would be across the room. The room was secure, so there was no way someone else was doing this. When we asked her questions, she'd just say, it was Tiberius.
Ugh.
After she was discharged, we always had trouble with that room. If there was going to be a rapid response or code, it happened in that room. One night, a guard reported lights blinking on and off. It was that room.
Ugh.
The little hands.
Oh, no, I hate this one already.
I've never lived in a haunted house, but my mom did as a teen. Other houses on our street had strange things going on too. A few homes away from her lived a family. One night, the daughter went to bed with a bad headache. The next day, she was dead. She passed from an aneurysm. After her funeral, the family went away to get their minds off the tragedy, and the father asked my uncle, my mom's brother, to check on their pets. My mom and dad, who were dating at the time, went with him. My mother had heard there was a grand piano and she wanted to play it. My dad was studying to be a veterinarian. After entering the house, my uncle and my father headed to the basement to see the animals. My mother went to the piano on the ground floor. She was playing it when she felt something brush her ankles. She thought it was a cat. She thought a cat must have left the basement and walked past her. She kept playing, and then she felt it again. She looked under the piano and saw nothing. When she started again, she felt hands clasp her legs tightly. She dashed to the basement door, called my uncle and my father, and waited for them. Back outside, my uncle could tell my mom was rattled, and she asked what was wrong. She told him what had happened, and he turned white. He had told her the daughter who had died used to play a game with her father. When he played the piano, she'd crawl underneath, grab his ankles, push his feet up and down on the pedals.
I hate that.
Mm.
I'm making a lot of faces, which I know doesn't translate through podcasts, but
Oh wait, and on this one for you, as it's called, the Ashley Street Ghost.
Ooh.
This next true tale comes from the University of Michigan in Ann Arbor.
Oh, hey, I went to Michigan State, so boo.
Ah.
Boo, University of Michigan, but still, it's from Michigan. That's kind of cool.
The haunting happened in 1972 at a party hosted by University of Michigan students living on Ashley Street. A 15-year-old girl, who probably had no business being there in the first place, suddenly felt a strange, bone-chilling cold. In an attempt to warm up, she went upstairs because heat rises, we guess. That's when things went really awry. One of the walls of the house started moving, and a black shadow approached the girl. Meanwhile, downstairs, posters were spontaneously popping off the wall and falling into a growing pile on the floor.
Oh my God.
The girl wandered back downstairs where she found herself saying these strange words. The drugs and addiction were my fault, and I accept responsibility for that. But I was not that way deep down inside. I want to apologize to everyone involved for what I had done. What made those words even stranger was that the girl did not do drugs, let alone have an addiction. Her words didn't seem all that strange to the students who lived in the house. Before they moved in, the house had been inhabited by a man with a very serious addiction. The reason he no longer lived there, he died of a heroin overdose.
Oh gosh.
Creepy.
Yeah. Ugh.
Yeah. We'll finish up there.
All right. I loved it and hated it all at the same time.
Which one was your favorite?
The friend one that she picked up on the side of the road and dropped off.
Oh yeah.
Ugh.
Fuck.
What?
Don't pick people up. Like even if you know them. Like just don't.
Don't ever pick people up. No. I always love the when you drive by like a prison. I don't know if you guys have it in Canada, but here when you drive by a prison area, they always have signs like on the expressways or on the roads that says prison area, do not pick up hitchhikers. And I always think like, who picks up hitchhikers nowadays?
That's interesting. See, all of our prisons are like just in and amongst the city. So like
Ours are usually kind of like on the outskirts of cities, kind of further out, like big building areas. Some of them are in the cities, but they're usually kind of like a little bit removed.
yeah, no, not in Canada. They're smacked up because most of them have been here for longer than the cities.
Gotcha. That makes sense.
But even the ones that are like set off the road, I don't think I've ever seen a don't pick up hitchhikers.
Yeah, they always, which is nice that they warn you. But also again, who is picking up hitchhikers nowadays? Don't do it, people. Don't do it.
I always say that like Kingston's like prison capital of Canada, right? Because we used to have like 9 prisons, active prisons.
Oh wow.
Now there's only 7. That's still a lot. But they always say that it's probably the safest place because you know that if anybody escapes, they're not staying.
Yeah, that's true.
Like,
That's true. They're gonna get
getting
the hell out of there.
Out of here.
Yeah. That's actually a really good point.
Like the only person that's really ever been like successful escaping is Ty Khan. Maybe I'll do that story later.
Oh, cool.
But he escaped from 3 prisons.
Oh wow.
Including Kingston Penitentiary, Collins Bay Penitentiary, and then like a juvenile detention center when he was younger.
Is he still in jail?
He's dead.
Oh, okay.
He died in a police shootout.
Oh geez. Okay. Yeah, do that story. That sounds interesting.
Yeah. He used to tell that story all the time on my tours.
Oh, okay. Do you have any jokes?
Let's see.
Let's see if I have any bad jokes.
What do you call 2 witches sharing an apartment?
I don't know what.
Roommates.
Which knight invented King Arthur's round table?
Oh, I think Jess did this one.
Oh,
Circumference.
yeah.
What do you call a fat pumpkin?
I don't know.
A pumpkin.
A pumpkin. What do you call a fly without wings?
A dead.
A walk.
A walk.
Oh my god, this was really stupid. How can you find Will Smith in the snow?
How can you find Will Smith in the snow?
Yeah.
I don't know.
You follow the Fresh Prince. It's so bad. I love it.
I don't know what.
Oh gosh. What's the difference between a piano and a fish? You can tune a piano, but you can't tune a fish. That's all I have.
My God. Hold on. Find one like good one. What do you get when you drop a pumpkin?
What?
Squash.
Squash. That's funny. Oh, Well, if you want more of us lovely ladies, you can find us at historiesandmysteries.ca. We are also on Facebook and Instagram, Histories and Mysteries podcast. And if you'd like it to leave us rate and review us, we would really appreciate it. You can do that on Spotify and or Apple Podcasts. We got 31 ratings on the American Apple Podcast right now.
Woo!
Yeah, it's pretty exciting. So if you want to add to that, we'd
great.
appreciate it.
Sure would.
Yeah.
Also, if you want to send us your creepy ghost stories.
Oh, we would love that. Please send us your ghost stories to our email, historiesandmysteries515@gmail.com, and maybe we'll read them on the air.
Also, what are your predictions about the Watcher? Is it a
Ooh,
hoax?
yeah. What are your predictions? Well, it's never been solved. So what are your thoughts on it, I guess?
That's like another thing that makes me think it's like a hoax.
Because nobody's ever.
Because it's still never been solved.
Yeah. Nobody's like come forward or anything.
Yeah. It's just kind of like, oh, I guess.
Yeah. Could be
So
that.
Watcher will watch.
Yeah. That makes sense.
Forever.
All right. Well, we look forward to bringing you 2 new episodes next week. We look forward to bringing you 2 new stories next week. Bye.